Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I'm Coyote Okikulu. First, the headlines. Well, U.S. sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, says delivery may take months. Also, Ukrainian pilots wish for U.S. attack helicopters after tank deliveries approved. Plus, President Putin ignores German tank decision, dispenses career advice on Moscow University visit. Let's get into it right away. The United States has announced it will supply Ukraine with 31 advanced M1 Abrams tanks worth $400 million in a matter of months, a decision that helped break a diplomatic logjam with Germany over how best to help Kyiv in its war against Russia. Well, President Joe Biden announced this decision at the White House and thanked Germany for its decision to supply Ukraine with Leopard 2 tanks.
The United States has worked in lockstep with our allies and partners around the world to make sure the Ukrainian people are in the strongest possible position to defend their nation, their families, and against the truly brutal aggression of Russia. I haven't seen the likes of this in a long time. The United States and Europe are fully united. Armored capability, as General Austin will tell you, has been critical. And that's why the United States has committed hundreds of armored fighting vehicles to date, including more than 500 as part of the assistance package we announced last Friday. And today I'm announcing that the United States will be sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine. So we're also giving Ukraine the parts and equipment necessary to effectively sustain these tanks on the battlefield. And we'll begin to train the Ukrainian troops on these issues of sustainment, logistics, and maintenance as soon as possible.
Meanwhile, the White House says it may take months, in fact, many months, for the powerful U.S. tanks that President Joe Biden agreed to send to Ukraine to reach their destination. The White House National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby says that Ukraine needs to be ready for when the weather improves and a Russian offensive picks up speed. Well, he said that Washington has to be prepared to support Ukraine for as long as it takes, and that there is no indication that the Russian leader, President Vladimir Putin, has designs on striking NATO territory.
The Pentagon, I think, talked about this earlier today. There's no date certain on the calendar. I think what we're looking at is what's probably going to be many months before they're actually there. These tanks are meant to help Ukraine fight effectively on open terrain, to defend their sovereignty and their territory, and to win back territory that the Russians have taken from them. Right now, I mean, it's wintertime, so the conditions are not great. There's some fighting in the Donbass, but other than that, there's not been a whole heck of a lot, at least around down in the south. But as the weather conditions improve, you can expect that the Russians are going to pick up the tempo. We have to be ready for that, and I know the Ukrainians feel they have to be ready for that. So it's about helping Ukraine defend itself, but also, as you heard the president say, helping Ukraine be able to go on the offense when the weather conditions and when the operational conditions are permissive. And so we got to make sure that Ukraine can succeed on the battlefield so that they can succeed at the negotiating table. And it's difficult to be able to predict how long this is going to go on, but we have to be prepared. And this is I think, to get to your question, well, I can't tell the American people exactly how long it's going to take. We have to be prepared to stay at this task of supporting Ukraine, as the president said, for as long as it takes, with the expectation clearly that we want it to end quickly. We want it to end now.
Or staying with the U.S. announcement to supply Ukraine with those 31 advanced M1 Abrams tanks worth $400 million this time. Well, it is a decision that helped break a diplomatic logjam with Germany over how best to help Kyiv in its war against Russia. But an analyst, Stephen Biddle, believes that these tanks likely won't make a significant difference on the battlefield. Well, we'll bring you that subsequently. But it's no news that Germany will also supply its Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, overcoming misgivings about sending heavy weaponry that Kyiv sees as crucial to defeat Russia's invasion, but that Moscow casts as a dangerous provocation. Germany's decision paves the way for other countries such as Poland, Spain, Finland, the Netherlands and Norway to supply some of their Leopard tanks to Ukraine, go in some way towards delivering the hundreds of tanks that Ukraine says it needs. While hoping to allay concerns about sending the weapons, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz asked Germans to trust his government to ensure there was no increased risk to their country and to coordinate steps with allies. And just before Germany's official announcement to send the Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine, pressure has been building for weeks on German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's government to send the tanks and allow NATO allies to do the same before the expected spring offensives by both sides. Meanwhile, an analyst, Angela Stent, says that Germany's decision is a sea change in the way the country views its relationships with Russia and with Russia's neighbors.
The fact that the Germans were finally willing to supply the Ukrainians with these tanks really does show that this is a sea change in the way that Germany views its relationship with Russia and with Russia's neighbors, and also, I would say, with Central and Eastern Europe. I followed the debate closely surrounding these tanks. You know, you do have a number of German officials and experts, commentators saying we can't have German tanks, you know, on the border with Russia again. This evokes terrible, terrible memories of World War II. But the counter argument to this is, because you hear a lot about Russia, is if you look at how Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, it invaded it through Ukraine and Belarus. So Germany also has a historic responsibility towards Ukrainians for what happened in World War II. The precondition for Germany supplying tanks was that the United States had to do so too, because Germany did not want to go this alone. Otherwise, you know, the Ukrainians have been getting tanks from Poland and some other countries, but they're all Soviet-era tanks. And the difference is these are modern Western tanks, and they're obviously better than the old Soviet ones.
On the other hand, Spain's defense minister says Madrid was open to providing Ukraine with German-made Leopard 2 tanks after Germany agreed to send the tanks and said NATO allies could do the same. The defense minister, Margarita Robles, says that Madrid will act in coordination with its Western allies to help Ukraine fend off Russia's invasion. Well, Spain has 182 A4 tanks, according to security and defense researcher Felix Artiega of the Elcano think tank. Well, the 2A4 is an older standard model for many European countries, and Ukrainian tank crews can receive standard training on them. Our footage from Britain's Ministry of Defense showcases the Challenger 2 tank, which the UK will send to Ukraine. Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has committed to sending a squadron of 14 Challenger 2 tanks to Ukraine over the coming weeks. Well, the Challenger 2 is a battle tank designed to attack other tanks and has been in service with the British Army since 1994. And according to the Army, it has been deployed in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, and Iraq. Ukrainian helicopter pilots operating in the country's east express hope that a decision by Western allies on tank deliveries will open a door to giving more aviation combat hardware to Ukraine. Mykolai, 28-year-old military helicopter pilot, said that Ukrainian air forces need to replace old non-guided rockets installed on the military helicopters with those having targeting systems on them. He says, quote, "Everyone knows about U.S. Hellfire rockets installed on Apache helicopters. Everyone is certainly dreaming of those helicopters, German Tiger helicopters. We hope we'll get them one day." Russian President Vladimir Putin avoided commenting on Germany's landmark decision to supply tanks to Ukraine during a visit to Moscow State University, instead dispensing career advice to students and fielding questions and other topics. President Putin, a fluent German speaker who served in the former East Germany as a KGB officer, spent more than an hour responding to students' questions on issues ranging from lost dogs to quantum technology, though the war in Ukraine also kept cropping up indirectly.
I think such people like you understand sharper and more precisely than anybody else the need for what Russia is doing now in support of our citizens living on these territories. in Luhansk and Donetsk, in the Donbass in a whole, in Kherson, and in Zaporizhia. The goal, as I've said many times before, first of all, is to demand people and to defend Russia itself from the threats that are being made on historically our own neighboring territories. The largest European country, an economic giant, Germany. So the USSR legally formalized the end of its occupation. After the World War II, Germany was divided into 4 sectors as known: the American, the French, the British, and the Soviet one. So the Soviet Union has legally formalized the end of this occupation status. Unlike the United States, formally, strictly speaking, there are occupational troops on the German territory. This is a fact, and there are a lot of them there.
Well, footage shows Russian air defense systems and attack helicopters in Russia-controlled Luhansk region. And the west of Luhansk region has been an area of intense battles between the Russian and the Ukrainian forces since the start of the conflict. But Kyiv and its Western allies say Russia's invasion of Ukraine amounts to an unprovoked war of aggression aimed at seizing territory. But Moscow says the West is using Ukraine to weaken Russia's own security, and Russia was forced to start the military operation to ensure its own safety. But for more on this and other related developments, we're joined on the program by a professor of international relations at the Lagos State University, Professor Dapo Thomas. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on the program. Well, he joins us virtually, and I mean, following the latest trends, I'll pick up from the last statement made by Russia, saying that this is essentially to protect its territory, again accusing the U.S. But then when you look at the support Ukraine is getting, not just from the U.S., from Germany and other NATO allied countries, one wonders, does it look like we're on the verge of a start of the end of this war?
Well, the concept of the war is being redefined. Means that we are now moving from Ukraine defending its territory, but also doing a kind of counter-offensive against Russia with the supply of those tanks, M1 Abrams and Leopard 2 and Challenger. So these are offensive. These are tanks that are very good in offensive and counter-offensive moves. And so the concept is being. However, I do not think that we are moving towards the end. If Russia insists or continue and take this kind of posture, in the sense that I think that pride has to be subdued in this distance, and based on so many things that one has read of Putin, I doubt if he's the kind of person that is ready to do away with his pride. If he does away with his pride, then it's good for the entire continent. I mean, it's good for the entire world. In the sense that now they can sit down and negotiate. But, negotiate from whose perspective now and with what? For as long as Ukraine still feels that its territory has been occupied, I think the latest addition now is Solidar. Where you also think of Crimea, 2014, as now being part of Russia. And then you look at the entire Donbass region, definitely know that this is not the time to negotiate for the Ukrainians, definitely. It pays only Russia. And even at that, I don't even think that Russia is ready to negotiate anything. So we are moving towards Armageddon. I want to believe, because now it is showing that NATO still maintains some kind of, well, let me put it in the Nigerian phrase, don't look attitude. Don't look in the sense that they are not joining decisively and militarily in the engagement, the military engagement that is going on now, the offensive that is going on in Ukraine. But in terms of supplies of heavy machine, heavy equipment and all it, yes, they are now joining indirectly. And then most of the country are redefining their concept of intervention or interference. And as a result of that, you can see that US, because it's so clear that yes, it's a proxy war, and then you don't want your proxy to lose. And you know, in the situation or in the event that Ukraine loses its war, it's going to affect the US and its European allies. As a result of the fact that, look, once Russia, and it, you know, that's why it has been said that you don't appease an aggressor. In 2014, if this kind of action had been taken, there wouldn't have been any need for Russia to have an incursion into Ukraine, because it would have been nipped in the bud. But because Putin was given a leeway, you know, just free to operate, 2014, and then finally annexed Crimea, and the whole world was looking. Nobody did anything. Well, we can say, okay, there was a kind of tacit, you know, resistance, but, you know, it was not massive as what we have now. So now the entire world is telling Putin that, look, this war cannot go on like this. We are going to put a stop to it.
Well, you know, when you talked about tending towards Armageddon, it just reminded me of the doomsday clock. And as at the last check, I think it says 90 seconds to midnight. If we're tending towards Armageddon, as you put it, and I mean, except the definition has changed, Armageddon is nothing good. In fact, it is the worst of the ills you can ever imagine. Why then aren't we seeing alarm bells ringing? If you say NATO is approaching or is adopting such approach to this, shouldn't this be a time when the world, or at least world powers, world leaders, begin to say, wait a minute, this is going to get out of hand and we need to stop this now? Have you seen enough willpower in that light such that we avert this possible doomsday? Except, of course, that is the goal.
Well, I may not say that's the goal or the objective, because the US has demonstrated sufficient enthusiasm to ensure that this war does not escalate. And that is by staying away from the war, just about from all what it has been decided that they should do. That is to supply the arms, to supply Ukraine with arms and heavy machinery. Now, which, apart from Biden, who has not personally intervened, who has not personally made any move to initiate it, who has not actually initiated any peace move, but even US indirectly through Austin Floyd, through Austin Floyd, that's the defense minister, defense secretary. Yes, has already made move by even contacting. The Russians are not making any direct contact. They are not initiating any move at all. You know, this has always been from US. The defense secretary has spoken to its defense counterpart in Russia, but all this did not come to anything. Who has not intervened? Macron has intervened. What came out of it? Erdogan of Turkey has made move. What came out of it? Everybody has spoken to Putin. So it's not about the world leaders not making any move to ensure that there is global peace or maybe security, global security. But it is the fact that one man has just refused to reason it out that, look, this thing does not make any sense as far as the world is concerned. Because aggression is aggression, whether it's being carried out by a superpower or anything. And it is not just an aggression. It's an aggression in the first place, and then it's an aggression that even the superpower now claims that its own territory must be sacrosanct. It's sacrosanct. That is, the Ukrainians should not even attack. And he's saying the world should not even intervene. And this was what gave him the leverage to continue the onslaught. Because initially when the war started, nobody, in fact, the world was aghast with, we were surprised, astonished, that look, how could one man have this kind of effrontery to be riding roughshod over a country? And then the world, including US, was just watching. You know, but now they are intervening in terms, seriously, in terms of the supplies they are making. And with the quality of the machine, the heavy equipment they are supplying now and delivering to Ukraine. So he knows, he should know now look, we have the party is over. So the fact is that somebody at a state will have to tell Putin that the party is over, because for almost 6 months, 7 months, even 1 year, you understand, it's going to be a year, February 24. Everybody has made one way or the other. I don't know how many times Boris Johnson went to Russia, went to Macron also, and spoke to him, but he never bought.
Well, Secretary Lord Austin has said recently that, the world doesn't have time, or essentially Ukraine doesn't have time before the next offensive. And off the back of that, we heard the US president speaking about, those powerful tanks that will be deployed. But then the challenge is, when you said that the game is up, the US is not quite clear on just the time frame for delivering those platforms or those weapons. And listening to the advisor say many months, and nothing was definitive. I wonder if you sense something that is maybe not being said, really, because to make such major decision, you'd expect that at least all of the I's have been dotted and the T's crossed. Is there something more that could be at play here? Perhaps some sort of hesitation, or still trying to be careful not to escalate issues?
So I think two issues are involved here. One, it takes 3 months for them to train the Ukrainians how to maintain, how to use. So they are going for training, not in Ukraine, they are going for training in the United States. That's the first factor. The second factor is that, tactically and very, very crucially and strategically, you cannot even disclose the movement, the time and the movement of such tanks. Because even Russia has said that it's going to burn, that they are going to burn. All the tanks will be burnt. So that suggests that anything can happen, possibly from the point of from the point of takeoff to the point of delivery. Anything can happen. So for strategic reasons, they cannot disclose. And in any case, it is even good that for tactical reasons too, it gives Putin the opportunity, the time or the kind of leverage, space leverage, for him to decide whether he wants to go into this. Because it's going to be a very tough battle. And the Ukrainians are very good in using some of these tanks. And without even much tanks like this, they have been able to recover some of their territories, initially occupied by the Russians when they came. So, but now they have seen that he is mobilizing from North Korea, it's mobilizing from one end, and then he's preparing for serious offensive.
Right.
That's why the war. These people have their own intelligence report. They have been able to see that it's seriously preparing for a very serious offensive. So that's why all the countries and allies are supporting.
Well, thank you for providing that insight. I think that will prove very instructive. I would like to thank you so much, Dr. Dapo Thomas, a professor of International Relations, Lagos State University. Thank you so much for your time on the program this morning.
Thank you, Cardi. Thank you.
Well, after the break, suspected author of Spain's letter bomb attacks in police custody. We'll have details in a moment. Please stay with us. Well, you're welcome back. A Spanish man has been arrested by police in Spain on suspicion of sending 6 letter bombs to the Spanish Prime Minister, the Ukraine ambassador in Madrid, and other high-profile targets late last year. The country's Interior Ministry said in a statement that the arrest of the 74-year-old suspect took place in the town of Miranda de Ebro, about a 3-hour drive north of Madrid. The statement adds that police said the suspect is retired, is very active on social media, and has technical and computer knowledge. Police determined that the suspect participated in sending the 6 letters from the city of Burgos, about an hour's drive southwest of where he was arrested. An International Atomic Energy Agency chief, Rafael Grossi, says diplomatic efforts to prevent Iran developing a nuclear weapon should restart, warning that Tehran has amassed enough material for several nuclear weapons. Speaking ahead of a planned visit to Tehran, Grossi told a European Parliament subcommittee in Brussels that Iran has not yet built a nuclear weapon, and the West should redouble efforts to stop it from doing so. The IAEA chief is heading to Tehran in February for a much-needed political dialogue, despite the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Grossi described the JCPOA, that's the plan of action, as an empty shell, saying diplomatic activity links to reviving the 2015 nuclear deal is close to non-existent. Now, after strong electoral results in the midterm elections, Democrats in some key states are moving quickly this year on voting rights, pushing ambitious plans to expand access to ballot ahead of the 2024 presidential election in the United States. In the presidential swing state of Michigan, where Democrats have gained the governorship in both legislative chambers for the first time in roughly 4 decades, Democratic Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and a group of legislators recently announced a package of voting-related priorities. They range from criminalizing the harassment of election workers to carrying out a voter-approved expansion of early voting. Newly empowered Democrats in Minnesota, meanwhile, are advancing a suite of election changes through the legislature that include instituting automatic voter registration and restoring voting rights to people convicted of felonies. Staying in the United States, advisors to former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden jumped on the news of classified documents being found in former Vice President Mike Pence's Indiana home, with both viewing it as a helpful defense in their own document investigations. Biden's team continues to draw a distinction between him and Trump when it comes to their handling of classified documents, and the parallels between the Pence and Biden cases have served to sharpen that argument in the initial fallout. On one hand, Trump's legal team views the news of classified documents found at Pence's home as a positive development for the former president, believing the discovery, coupled with President Biden's own ongoing special counsel investigation related to his handling of classified documents, changes the dynamics of the Justice Department's investigation into the former president. While the circumstances are different in each case, members of Trump's legal team believe these developments will make it harder for prosecutors to justify bringing criminal charges against any of them. Well, staying with that, the National Archives is looking into sending letters to all living former presidents and vice presidents, asking them to go through their records to ensure there are no classified materials, and that's according to sources familiar with the matter. Representatives for 4 former presidents say that they do not have any classified records in their possession after news that former Vice President Mike Pence had classified documents in his Indiana home. Well, the representatives for former presidents Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and the late George H.W. Bush all said that all classified records had been turned over to the National Archives upon leaving office. Former President Donald Trump and current President Joe Biden have also been subject to scrutiny after classified material was found in their homes. Well, let's talk to our Washington correspondent, Mary Bird. She joins us live on the program. Good morning, Maria. I know it's quite early there, but can you give us an update on the discovery of classified documents found in former Vice President Mike Pence's Indiana home? It's like the latest in the string of discoveries now.
Good morning. Yes, we have definitely seen a real spike in what would be considered something that is unusual with the classified documents in several of the former president, now former vice president, and current president's home. And so what we're seeing is that there was very minimal number of classified documents in former Vice President Pence's home. They have not found an exorbitant number of those files, but I think what this really does just allows people to see, and really Americans to understand, that there could be a challenge with the process in which presidents and vice presidents of the National Archives goes through when they do retire records when someone leaves office. And so the question really is this an issue of a flaw? And is this something being deceptive or secret or some sort of violating a policy that is occurring, or is this a lack of administrative processing that the U.S. obviously has seen, as we've now seen the former vice president having files as well. So this is potentially something that could help President Biden, I think more specifically, but also former President Trump, because this might not put as much of a spotlight on the legalities of what actually occurred with the classified files. The challenge is going to be the type of files, and if there was anything that the U.S. had that should have been kept extremely confidential, that could have broken any sort of relationships or any information, especially as we look at the war with Ukraine, as we look at other foreign relationships that we might have had.
You know, there's a legal angle to this for the prosecutors and all of that, but then the perception from the general public, I think, is also a major one. How is the public viewing this, the discovery of the documents, first with former President Trump, now with current President Joe Biden, and former Vice President Mike Pence? How is the public handling this? Is this maybe some sort of dent on their images, or they're just waiting to see how the investigations go?
Well, as we know, former President Trump has been kind of under fire ever since the January 6th attacks investigation. And I think this was just another fuel to that fire to say that former President Trump was going through it and not following appropriate protocols. And so I think that what this is going to potentially do is put a taint on what he might look at for his next run for office, as we all know that he's expected to run in the next upcoming election cycle. And so that piece. But for President Biden, I think it's most damaging at this point for him, as he has not yet formally announced his run for the next election cycle as well for re-election. And so that is, I think, where he's concerned, because he was expected to make that announcement early January. We're now at the end of January, and we still have not seen that formal announcement come out. And this is all related to the fact that you see members of his own party, Democrats, who are very outspoken, very upset about the fact that these files were found. And so what does that say for him as he looks to run for office in the next year to 2 years, and his own party is questioning his ethics and questioning whether or not the keeping those documents was unethical.
And just, a quick follow-up. Will this then matter to the people, the voters? Because I imagine all of them have some sort of political future that might be decided at the polls. Do you think this will play a major role for the people in deciding who to vote for, who to support, or who not to support? Is it a major, factor in deciding who to support for the people, that is?
What we're seeing right now is that you have a very small percentage of individuals that are very outraged by the issue. You have about 80% of Americans that are looking at this as a concern. But I think that if they're able to find a way, if the National Archives finds a way to be able to show that there is an administrative flaw in the process, and that there are other presidents that have found classified files in their homes or in their other offices outside of the White House after they have left office, I think then you'll be able to see maybe more of a understanding from the American people and not have such a heavy weight, I think, on the next election cycle.
I realize that we may have maybe glossed over the fact that, this is probably not the case in other countries, having classified documents being discovered or even talking about it in the first place. So in the context of the American governance system, national security and all of that, just what roles do these classified documents play? How vital are they? I'm short of just saying, what are classified documents anyway, at least for the viewer out there who's wondering, what exactly is this about?
Well, the classified files that typically are seen are any information. If we're, in the midst of, let's think about the Afghanistan and when we went in to take out Osama bin Laden, if there was any information about the plans for that, if there was any details around secrets as far as the military goes with the U.S., obviously there's a ton, every country has a ton of information that they're hoping to keep classified and confidential as it relates to the way in which they plan to deal with adversarial relationships. If there are things around the economics of the United States that might potentially put the U.S. at risk if they're released, then those are the types of information that have typically been kept away from anyone who is not what would be considered someone with a secret clearance. In the U.S., we have various levels of clearances, and a secret clearance is one that allows you to be able to handle classified information and to receive that information. And those types of information are oftentimes put in locked rooms and areas that someone could not easily be able to access them.
Very well explained, Maria. Thank you so much for that. I think moving forward now, there's better understanding, at least for the public. But, I mean, thank you for staying up. I know it's just a little past midnight where you're at, so good morning. It's still in order. Thank you for your time. Maria Bird joining us from Washington. Well, the United Nations Cultural Agency, UNESCO, designated the historic center of Odessa, a strategic port city on Ukraine's Black Sea coast, a World Heritage in Danger site. Now, the status awarded by a UNESCO panel meeting in Paris is designed to help protect Odessa's cultural heritage, which has been under threat since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and enable access to financial and technical international aid. Odessa has been bombed several times by Russia since its invasion of Ukraine on February the 24th, 2022.
Fortunately, due to the full-scale Russian invasion to Ukraine, Odessa heritage sites are also under the threat. In the port, local citizens are discovering Russian mines, and Odessa Art Museum was, as other buildings damaged, citizens were killed. That's why I am very much grateful that today your committee of UNESCO was able to demonstrate its devotion to the principles of universal outstanding values, to protect multinational historical and cultural heritage that was created by Greeks, French, Italians, Jews, Russians, Ukrainians, Tatars, and other nationalities.
Today we witness the funerals of the World Heritage Convention. Under unprecedented pressure of the group of countries, every single guiding principle, including scientific objectivity, was shamefully violated.
We reiterate our calls on the Russian Federation to end its war of aggression against Ukraine and to cease its destruction of Ukrainian cultural heritage, tangible and intangible.
I think we did the right job today. I wish to congratulate all the members of the committee to make this possible. I think this is a good day for the World Heritage List, and the ultimate goal of which is the protection of the properties.
When we return, IOC clears path for Russian and Belarusian athletes to participate in upcoming Olympic Games. Join us again. Welcome back. Inijam Mekwa joins me now to walk us through some of the recent developments, especially the business angle to this. Good morning, Ini. And,
Good morning,
just seeing that story that Russian citizens who are moving to Turkey are now being denied residence permit. I know that if there was a term for Jakba in Russia, it will be the case right now because thousands of people have moved there.
Yes.
Why now? Because Turkey has been kind of maybe neutral. So what's going on?
I guess they've had, everybody has a quota. They also have their infrastructure limits, the limit that infrastructure can take. They also have their own economic issues. So already last year, 153,000 Russians have gotten the permits, resident permits to stay there. That's just for a year anyway. It's not like forever. And they have that since last year. So if you have 153,000 for 2022, and perhaps before this announcement, you've had some people move in 2023, so maybe you're talking about 200,000. What about the population of Turkey? What about the feeding? What about the energy? Fine, they're coming with their resources because they're going to pay for some of those things, rent and, all of that. But, every government, they need to plan with their population. And so if it's getting too much, then they need to put something there. So the Russians can still go to Turkey, they can still get the visa, but they only get a tourist visa, which allows them to stay for 60 days.
Right.
And then they can't renew it until 6 months. So after 60 days, you go back to your country, and then after 6 months, you can now come back again and maybe get a visa. And, you know, Russians have been moving. The other day, we did something on properties in Dubai, in the UAE, and we saw that a lot of Russians have moved money to the UAE. They've bought a lot of properties. They've got residence, you know, so they're everywhere now. Everyone seems to be, not everyone, well, a lot of Russians seems to be running away from Russia at this time following the war.
Some might say maybe that's another reason to look into ending this war. But, I mean, looks like Russia is getting some sort of goodwill. When we look at the ruble and the real and mutual settlements that's between Iran and Russia, it's exceeded 60%.
Yeah,
so maybe is that looking on the bright side for them?
Well, the thing is, the bigger picture is that Russia has been working a lot on the ruble. So they have some friendly countries that they trade in rubles. And of course, what that does is that it gives value to the ruble. So the sanctions do not really chip off as much as, you know, the Western world have liked for it to. So this is just another way they're working with the real, so people can pay. There's a payment system between the real and the ruble. There's also one with the yuan. They're also working with India, you know. So it's some of the efforts that Russia is taking to ensure that they are not totally just losing. Yes. And then also, it's also important that this time, this is when there's the export proceeds towards the end of the month in Russia. So export proceeds are now changed to rubles. So it places another level of demand on the rubles, and then it increases the volume. Because last week, the ruble actually dropped just by a week. Not doing as bad, you know.
In light of all of the...
Naira.
You have to sneak that in. It's okay.
So the ruble has threatened from the 1 week low because it's a period where the ruble is very much in demand, and then going with Iran, they have the one with yuan and all of that. So some ingenious ways that Russia is using.
I mean, what will this conversation be without crypto?
Ladi Williams should be having this conversation. So you know, the crypto space, a lot of people think it's a place you can hide because it's decentralized. So you don't have a central bank breathing down your neck. But the thing is, it does have a blockchain where anybody at all can go through, including the regulators can go there and see. So some guys had gotten some illicit profits, illicit money, and passed it through the crypto and then landed it as rubles. So maybe because you know, Russia is under a lot of sanctions now, they thought that the ruble would not get attention of regulators.
Just be under the radar, right?
Exactly, you know, and so it's Russia, it's ruble, so we're going to get our eyes off it. But unfortunately, it didn't go away like that, because the US police and the EU got on that, and then they got some guys arrested because of that illicit fund, which they used, they tried to launder, or they already laundered it, you know, by buying the ruble through crypto. So they passed the money to Binance, you know, one of the platforms for trading crypto, and then they sold it out as rubles. But, you know, it's not really that decentralized that you can escape and people cannot see what you're doing. And so they got caught at the end of the day.
It's like voting the open secret ballot. There's still the open angle. I know this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're going to be joining you on Business Morning and Ladi Williams for more on this. But thank you so much, Ineja Mekwa, for that update, business angle. Well, let's bring you some sports angle to this one now. The International Olympic Committee, IOC, outlined a multi-step plan for Russian and Belarusian athletes to participate at the upcoming 2024 Summer Games in Paris and the 2026 Winter Games in Milan. The IOC said it would continue its sanctions against Russian and Belarusian state and government officials, as well as prohibit sporting events organized by both countries' federations. The organization said its board had met and unanimously reaffirmed and called for a reinforcement of the sanctions already in place. The IOC said it would recommit and strengthen the organization's solidarity with the Ukrainian athletes and the Ukrainian Olympic Committee, and would support Ukraine's efforts to field a strong team at the Paris and Milan Games. Finally, a Mykolaiv tattoo artist said he set a new Ukrainian world record for continuous tattooing for 63 hours. The master, Denis Arkhipov, who held the marathon, inked non-stop from Sunday evening to Wednesday morning, that's just yesterday, after trying to beat the previous record held by a Russian of 61 hours. He said, quote, "I read in the news that a Russian holds the current record. I thought I have to beat him, as this is another front line as well." During the marathon, Arkhipov inked 9 tattoos. All of them were large and complex. He also had just 5 minutes to rest, eat, and drink coffee every hour. The Ukrainian record was set at 9:12 a.m. That's 07:12 GMT. And now the relevant committee will submit a petition to the Guinness Book of Records to make it official. Oh, fighting on and off the battlefield, it will seem. Well, that's it for the program this morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Kayode Okikere. Goodbye.